Hello, Professor Dokes. Today I'm going to be talking about the importance that tort law plays in the United States of America. Tort law is and will remain a large part of the American legal system because it allows for individuals to seek compensation they otherwise couldn't after they've been harmed by another individual or business. Unlike criminal law, which focuses on the punishment of an individual for breaking a law established by the state or federal government, tort law is more focused on compensating victims after they or their property have been damaged. The legal definition of a tort is an act or an omission of a process that causes injury or harm to another individual and is classified as a civil wrong. Because of this, tort laws differ in a few ways from criminal laws. While in both cases the accused is the defendant, in the case of a tort, the case is a civil proceeding where if the defendant loses, the defendant must pay the plaintiff restitution instead of suffering a criminal sentencing. In addition, while criminal cases are always brought forth by the government, a tort case is brought forth by an individual. It is also possible for an act to be both criminal and a tort at the same time. For example, if someone drives recklessly on the interstate and injures another person in the process, they might face criminal charges from the state of California for reckless driving and speeding. However, the injured person may also file a tort lawsuit afterwards seeking compensation for medical bills they've suffered, lost wages, and any other emotional or mental trauma they might have experienced. The distinction between the two is important because not every harmful act is necessarily criminal, but people still deserve a legal means of recovering from damages that have been inflicted on them by others. The first of three major categories of torts are intentional torts. An intentional tort occurs when someone deliberately harms another person or intentionally engages in harmful behavior. Unlike a negligence case, an intentional tort requires proof that the defendant was acting purposefully rather than accidentally. Common examples of these include, but are not limited to, assault, battery, trespassing, and, commonly lately, defamation. In these cases, the plaintiff must prove that there was harmful intention behind any of these acts and not the defendant merely making a negligent claim or acting carelessly. Because of this, intentional torts remain an important way for people to either recoup losses following an intentional harmful act or to defend themselves from slander from individuals and corporations. The second of the three major torts are negligent torts. A negligent tort occurs when an individual or company fails to act with proper care and, in the process, ends up causing damage to an individual or their property through their actions. One very common example of a negligent tort is that of a business failing to maintain proper adequate safety measures on their premises, allowing their customers to come to harm. In order for a tort to qualify as negligent, there typically must be four elements present. The first is a duty of care. That means the business or person had a legal responsibility to act reasonably. The second is a breach of duty. This occurs when the accused failed to meet the reasonable standard of care expected in the situation. The third is causation. The plaintiff must be able to prove that the defendant's actions are directly responsible for any damages or injuries that occurred. The fourth and final, as mentioned before, are damages. The plaintiff must be able to prove that they've actually been harmed by the actions of the accused. These legal requirements might be stringent, but are necessary to help the courts determine whether someone actually acted irresponsibly enough to be held legally liable for another person's injuries. The third of the three major categories of torts are strict liability torts. Strict liability torts differ from the other two in that the defendant might still be held legally responsible even if they did not intentionally cause harm or behave negligently to any of the involved parties. Strict liability is most commonly applied in defective product cases because when companies are expected to ensure that the products they sell are reasonably safe for consumers, there is often a failure somewhere on the supply chain. For example, if a defective airbag explodes, as famously did in the past, during an accident and injures someone, the manufacturer might still be held liable even if the company did not intentionally intend to create a dangerous exploding airbag. In strict liability cases, the plaintiff must prove that a defective or dangerous product existed, that the defect directly caused the injury that they received, and that the product they were using was being used in a reasonable manner foreseen by the company. Strict liability torts are important because they primarily protect consumers, a typically vulnerable class of people in modern-day corporate America, and encourage companies to maintain higher safety standards than they might otherwise not when designing and selling their products, something that has led to corporations campaigning against tort laws in many states. One of the most famous cases of tort law in American history is the case of Liebeck versus McDonald's Restaurants, otherwise commonly known as the McDonald's hot coffee case. In this case, Mrs. Stella Liebeck suffered third-degree burns across her nether regions after accidentally spilling McDonald's coffee onto her lap while sitting in a parked vehicle. The injuries were serious. The burns she ended up suffering ended up covering a significant portion of her lower body and required hospitalization, skin grafts, extensive medical treatment, including but not limited to genital reconstruction. Initially, Miss Liebeck only requested that McDonald's cover her medical expenses of value of roughly $20,000. However, the corporation refused, which led to her attorney filing a negligent tort lawsuit against the company. During the trial, evidence ended up showing that McDonald's had acted negligently, serving its coffee at temperatures between 180 and 190 degrees, which both reports and experts considered dangerously hot. Evidence also revealed during the trial that McDonald's had already received complaints, over 700 in the past, from customers who had experienced similar burns to Mrs. Liebeck. The jury ended up ultimately ruling in favor of Mrs. Liebeck because they revealed that McDonald's knowingly continued serving dangerously hot coffee despite being aware of the risks previously. This case later became popular in modern culture because of how heavily it was mocked due to defamation ads and campaigns run by the McDonald's Corporation. And though many people view it as a case of a frivolous lawsuit, it is an important example of just why tort laws are important. If we didn't have such methods available, Miss Liebeck might have never recovered from her injuries, or if she had, lived a significantly reduced quality of life afterwards. Tort law continues to play an important role today through modern lawsuits. One other major example is the case of the exploding airbag lawsuit involving the Takata Corporation. Takata airbags were found to contain severe airbags that caused the airbag to explode during accidents, sending metal fragments into both drivers and passengers. These defective airbags ended up injuring hundreds of people and ended up killing 28 people in the United States, and eventually led to one of the largest auto recalls in the United States history. As a result, lawsuits were ended up filed against the company, leading to the foundation of a trust fund dedicated to paying out eligible claims of the victim after the company was fined over $1 billion in damages. This case is an important example of just why strict tort laws are important. If companies are not forced to prioritize the safety of their customers, they likely will not. In conclusion, tort laws remain a very important part of the American legal system. They provide injured individuals like Miss Liebeck and those injured in the Takata airbag cases ways of recouping the damages and losses that an individual American might not otherwise be able to when faced with a large corporation. Although there are still ongoing debates regarding tort reform and excessive litigation regarding them, tort law will continue to play an essential role and must be protected against campaigns trying to reduce or otherwise eliminate their effectiveness that ensure fairness, accountability, and consumer protection in the United States.